Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Pitradishta prajasarge tapasairnavamavishan Dashavarsha sahasrani tapasarchang tapaspatim. Translation: When all these Prajetas were ordered by their father to marry and beget children, they all entered the ocean and practiced austerities and penances for 10,000 years. Thus they worshipped the master of all austerity, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: Sometimes great sages and ascetics enter the Himalaya mountains in order to find seclusion from the turmoil of the world. It appears, however, that all the Prajetas, the son of Prachina Barhi, entered the depths of the ocean to perform austerity in a secluded place. Since they performed austerities for 10,000 years, this incident took place in the Satya Yuga, when people used to live for 100,000 years. It is also significant that by their austerity they worship the master of austerities, Krishna, the personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one wants to perform austerities and penances in order to attain the supreme goal, one must attain the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one achieves the favor of the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that he has finished all kinds of austerities and penances and has attained efficiency in their execution. On the other hand, if one does not attain the perfect stage of devotional service, all austerities and penances actually have no meaning, for without the Supreme Lord, no one can attain the highest results derived from performing them. These last two sentences are a paraphrase of a verse from Narada Pancharatra. Can anyone say what it is? Say it. Say it loudly. Aradita yadi harim tapasatata kim naradito yadi harim tapasatata kim antabahir yadi harish tapasatata kim nantabahish bahir nantabahir yadi harish tapasatata kim. So it's more or less Prabhupada has paraphrased this verse in the last two sentences that we read of this Prabhupada. That if one is worshipping Hari, the Supreme Lord, then what's the use of performing austerities? There's no need, because you're already situated on the highest platform. Austerities are performed for achieving something better, but if you already achieved the best path, then there's no need to go down to a lower path. On the other hand, if you don't worship Hari, then what's the point of performing austerities? If you don't come to that by performing austerities, you don't come to the point of serving Hari, then it's also useless. So either way, it's useless. And if you see, then it's a repetition, slightly different. If one can see the Supreme Lord, or is aware that the Supreme Lord is inside and outside of everything, then what tapasatatakim? What will be of that? What is the use of doing austerity? And if one doesn't see the Supreme Lord outside and inside of everything, then again, what's the use of performing any austerity? So it's not giving much credence to the path of austerities. Alright, we'll go on with Prabhupada's purport. As stated in Bhagavad-gita, Lord Sri Krishna is the master of all penance and sacrifices. Bhuktaram yagya tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram. Thus the desired result of performing austerities may be derived from Lord Krishna. In Srimad Bhagavatam it is stated, Aho bata shvapakcho to gariyan yaj jivagre vartate namatubhyam te pustapas te juhuvu sasnur arya brahmanujur nama grinantiyete. It's a great one for the Western devotees especially. It gives us some hope. Here's the translation from Srila Prabhupada. Even if a person is born in a family of chandalas, the lowest birth one can get in human society, he is glorious if he chants the holy names of the Lord, for it is to be understood that by such chanting, a devotee definitely proves that he underwent all kinds of austerities in his previous life. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya, one who chants the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, attains the highest perfectional stage, which had previously been attained by people who entered the ocean and executed austerities for 10,000 years. In this age of Kali, if a person does not take advantage of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, which is offered as a great concession to the fallen human beings of this age, it is to be understood that he is very much bewildered by the illusory energy of the Lord. Can we put this fan on slow speed, please? Oh, it's on or off. It's one of those. It's very noisy. Well, what might be considered the most noteworthy points in the verse, from the point of view of someone who's reading as a citizen of the world in the 21st century, hasn't been touched upon by Srila Prabhupada in his purport at all. The first thing is that the first of these 2 points is that the Prajetas entered the ocean. And the second point is that they lived there for 10,000 years. So neither of these things seem to be very possible, according to 21st century outlook. Srila Prabhupada hasn't commented on them in the purport at all. It's just taken for granted. That's all. Take it or leave it. If you believe it, all right. If you don't, not all right, but that's your bad luck. So, it's described here. Bad luck means that he didn't have faith. What is that? This Mahaprasade Govinde Nama Brahmane Vaishnave Swalpa Punyavatam Rajan Vishvaso Naiva Jayate. It is not a call for breakfast. It's quoting an important shlok which says that people who have very little punya or pious activities, pious credits, such persons don't have faith in Mahaprasad. They think it's just some food, that's all. Just food that these silly people stick in front of a statue. That's what they think. Those silly people think like that. So people who don't have much piety, they also don't have faith in Mahaprasad, in Govinda, in the holy name, or in the Vaishnavas. And this can be extended to that they don't have faith in the deity, they don't have faith in the Shastra, they don't have faith in the Dhams, and so on and so on and so on. So we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam with faith, sarvametad ritang manye yang mang vadasi keshava, that everything here is factual and real, unless it's explicitly stated not to be so, as also comes in this 4th canto, the allegorical story of Maharaj Puranjan, which was told to Maharaj Prachina Barhisha. Here it's mentioned how the Prajetas entered the water and performed austerities, having taken an order from their father. This is also something which in the modern world is considered wrong, or is not not even considered. In the Western world, no father would even think to give his son any order. He might get arrested. You never know. He might get accused of child abuse. Something like this. There was one incident told to me. One Indian man in America emigrated, and his son, who was in his early teens, he was misbehaving somehow or other, and his father slapped him. So he happened to tell his friends at school of this, and they encouraged him to tell the police. And his father, some respectable Indian gentleman, ended up in jail for 6 months. Such nonsense. And they wonder why there's problems in society. They don't have the slightest idea how the society should be ordered. So anyway, mostly sons, they're expected to follow the order of their father. People are afraid of following orders because they think that they'll be exploited, which is quite possible if one is not under the guidance of persons who are actually their well-wishers and persons who are not trained to understand what the purpose of life is. Then we may be misled. So in the modern age, there's this idea, well, everyone should be independent and not take any orders from anyone else, which of course doesn't work at all. They say like that you should be independent and think for yourself, but practically in society, to do anything at all, there has to be hierarchy and structure and orders given and orders followed. You can't even begin to learn at school anything unless there's some discipline. There has to be some kind of respect for the teacher, although they try to downplay it as much as possible. You can imagine joining the army, and then the avant-garde army, the undisciplined army. We're going to make an experiment here. The experiment will result, if they actually go to battle, in a non-existent army, because they'll all be destroyed by the opposing forces. Or anything. I mean, we can say, well, we don't want to accept any authority, but then if you go for a job, then either you take orders or you're out the first day, the first moment. So there's always hierarchy and there's always orders. Modern societies come down to the lamentable position that you only take orders if you get paid for it. Only if you had a job or something like this. But the natural order of human society, which modern anthropologists, psychologists and sociologists wouldn't accept that there's any natural order in human society, is that the father tells the children what to do. But they think there's something wrong with this. The natural order is that between the two genders, men dominate in society and women don't dominate. But that's also considered wrong in modern society. Although as Srila Prabhupada pointed out, it's the natural order of human life, because women hold the babies, they have babies, and they are dependent upon their husband if they have one, which they should have, if they have babies. So they have to look after the children and save the children. But in the modern age, the propaganda is that for women to just do the normal thing that women have always done since Lord Brahma and Manu, is to have children. That's considered something funny or wrong. Or to look after your children, you should be an airline pilot, or go to Iraq and fight in the war. What are you doing having children? But it's already that's seen to be it's a destructive policy, because in the Western world, they've had this idea, don't have children. It's hum do hamare do in India, or hum do hamare ek in India. That's the propaganda. And then, but in the Western world, it's not hum do, me ek hum. No need of any marriage. And the women may or may not have children. Mostly they don't have. And then they don't have any people to do the work, so they import a bunch of Arabs or whatever from Africa or wherever, and they have lots of children because Muslims don't believe in hamdo hamare do. And then gradually they take over the population, and then the glorious Western civilization is in demographic difficulty because the Westerners aren't having children, and they've imported all these people who in some areas are greater in population than what they might call the original race that was living there. So anyway, these are just some of the things, as Srila Prabhupada often used to point out. The defects of not following Shastra and what effect it has in human society. Srila Prabhupada was a practical acharya. He didn't always talk about prem, and actually, if you examine, he didn't really talk about prem very much at all. He spoke a lot about where we are at now and how we need to improve ourselves, and how we can do so, or the only way we can do so, is by following the message of Shastra and applying that practically in our lives. And then by following this process, then Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Shabda Kabunoi Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Koreye Udoi. That by following the process of hearing and chanting about Krishna, then naturally love for Krishna will arise. But Srila Prabhupada, as a practical acharya, very much concerned with the uplift of the people of the world. He wasn't concerned with advertising himself as a premi bhakta. He was interested in factually doing something to help the people of the world attain their original constitutional position in Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada, seeing the condition of the world being so miserably far away from anything, what to speak of spiritually, even materially for their own well-being, Srila Prabhupada wanted to introduce the principles of Daiva Varnashram society. Seeing the whole world completely apaswartha parayana, attached, everyone in the world very much attached to principles which is completely against their own self-interest. What could be more foolish than that? The prime example on the cigarette packet is stated, smoking causes cancer, smoking causes death, smoking kills. There's all varieties of the same kind of message. And still people buy it because they're attached to that which is against their self-interest, that which gives them a tiny sensation of tiny sensation, sense gratification. For that, they're so foolishly attached to that which will give them severe suffering in future. So many of these points Srila Prabhupada often spoke about. Of course, his ultimate aim was to bring people to the platform of Krishna Prem. But the normal condition in which Krishna consciousness has been preached has been within a society, within India to be precise, what we nowadays call India, which is a modern term, as you all know, where the cultural climate has more or less been favorable to accepting Krishna consciousness. And even the method of propagating Krishna consciousness, the traditional method of propagating Krishna consciousness, is by preaching according to Shastra. And people accept that saintly people are saintly people. And it's relatively easy to preach Krishna consciousness where there's a cultural background. It wasn't that. Previously, acharyas had to preach very much about following father's orders or basic points of varnashram society. In fact, we find actually in Bhagavad Dharma that the not following the father's orders for the sake of Krishna consciousness, that is the ideal is given there of Prahlad Maharaj, and the ideal of not following the husbands or the elders is given in the gopis of Vrindavan, who ran to Krishna despite being restrained by their husbands and elderly family members, and the Yagyapatnis, the wives of the Brahmanas, who were told, don't go, don't have anything to do with this Krishna and Balaram, but still they did, and they're glorified for that. However, before breaking the rules, if one understands the principle behind them, one can do so without making a mess. It's just like some expert musicians, they improvise. They can do so because they know all the basic principles. But if someone just picks up an instrument and they don't have no idea how to play it, then their so-called improvisation will just be a cacophony. Which if you don't understand what the word means, you can imagine what it means from the context. Sometimes our kirtans are like that. Fortunately, not in this temple so much. We have a pretty good kirtan team here, but in some places, we can applaud the bhav, but we just wish people could play in time and sing in tune and basic things like that. So, one should know and follow the basic principles. Otherwise there's chaos in society and nothing can be organized. We also want to organize. This Krishna conscious movement means it's not that everyone's moving in different directions and at different speeds according to their own idea. There's a movement, means it's an organization. And there has to be some discipline within that, and every person's an individual, and as is much propagated in modern society, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but actually in an organization you may have your opinion, but it doesn't work democratically. There may be some measure of feedback on democracy and all this, but ultimately someone has to make a decision. Not everyone may like that, but still you have to go along with it. Otherwise, if everyone disagrees with everything, then you can't do anything, because a movement means everyone's working together cooperatively. It has to be cooperation. Actually, we'll find later on in this section, or maybe it's already gone, that Lord Vishnu, it's already passed, Lord Vishnu, he praised the Prajetas for their cooperative mood among themselves. He liked that. And Srila Prabhupada comments in the purport of that verse that the Supreme Lord is very satisfied when he sees devotees cooperating among themselves to serve the Supreme Lord. I just recently got an email from Russia, where someone was asking me that, you see, there's someone who comes to a Namahata meeting in my apartment, or he came, and he was stinking of alcohol and reeking of tobacco, and as filthy, dirty, and everything about him was stinking and horrible. But anyway, even though he was drunk, he was in a kind of respectful mood. And he didn't really cause any disturbance to anyone, except sometimes he made some funny noises, which drunken people often do. But the leader of the local ISKCON or Hare Krishna group threw him out. And probably not literally, but he probably didn't literally pick him up and toss him out the window, but he ejected him. He wasn't allowed to stay. So there was some controversy over that. You see, even though he's drunk and he hasn't got the faintest idea what we're talking about because he's drunk, or what we're doing, somehow or other he's come, and we should be merciful to him and let him stay. And the example was given of Srila Prabhupada on the Bowery when the bum came in and put 2 rolls of toilet paper and muttered something incoherent. You can hear it on the recording. It's still there. And then he went out and everyone was thinking, well, it was a bum. There's plenty of them around here. Or maybe it wasn't on the Bowery, it was on 26 2nd Avenue. And Prabhupada said that he's made some advancement in Krishna consciousness, so the example was given. So, similarly, this person should have been allowed to stay and get the mercy by hearing the holy names and just being there. But the leader of the group thought, no, he should be ejected. So, some people didn't like that. Of course, it could be argued and that, well, we don't have anything against him personally, but at the same time we are trying to preach to what might be called more normal members of society, who most of them are not that advanced that they'd like to come back to a meeting in which you have to hold your nose all the way through it or light 3 packets of incense. And they don't really like to sit with a derelict and someone who's sitting quite peacefully, but you never know because he's drunk, he might jump up at any time and do anything completely crazy. So there's a good grounds for not allowing him to stay also. And even though you may say, well, it's very merciful to him, at the same time, he's not a prime candidate for becoming Krishna conscious. He's not as good a candidate as the others who are more likely to not come back at all. So it could be argued on both sides. But someone had to make a decision. The person in charge had to make a decision. And everyone may not agree with it or like it, but someone had to make a decision. And whenever you make a decision, there's going to be some people who don't agree with it, but at the same time, you have to make decisions. Otherwise, you can't do anything. If you just go on without making decisions, then everything either becomes chaotic or someone steps in who does make decisions and takes charge. That's what usually happens. So, those who do make decisions, they often are the butt of various snide remarks. As Srila Prabhupada comments in the first canto purport that what's exactly the wording? One of Prabhupada's brilliantly sums it all up in one sentence, but that those who are administrators are often criticized by the very people who they're working for the betterment of. They don't appreciate. They don't appreciate that this person is trying to help me and everyone else, but the people usually see things in terms of their own self-interest, and if their self-interest is affected, if they perceive that their self-interest is affected, then they're not very happy. We see this in modern society that politicians make some decision which favors one group of people, another group is disfavored by that, and the other group protests because their own self-interest has been diminished by certain decisions, just like some of you may remember during the VP Singh government when this reservation was introduced, and there were many protests especially from young Brahmins, young boys of the Brahmin caste, and some of them even burned themselves alive to protest. That was a pretty extreme protest. And anyway, the reservation system was calculated to win votes, so there wasn't much chance of it getting repealed, even though it works against the interest of the higher castes. And here's a subjective come objective statement. It probably works against the interest of the nation also to reserve places in colleges for people not at all on the basis of merit, but on the basis of their caste. It's casteism in reverse. So anyway, the point being made here is that, which again, it's not a point I really didn't get through to what Srila Prabhupada is talking about in the purport, but I was going to just mention briefly some of the words in the verse, and I didn't get to the purport yet. Anyway, the point that I was making is that the Father gave orders, and the Prajetas followed them. They're ordered to beget children. So they didn't just do that immediately. They didn't just like animals start begetting children. But they thought they had to prepare themselves for this because it's a very responsible thing to do. Not like in the modern world where, as the great philosopher of the modern Western world, John Lennon, said, you may not know who he is, those who are in the Western world may know who he is. The present generation probably don't, but he was actually one of the most influential people of our generation. So one thing he said, it's an apt comment, is that most children nowadays are born over a bottle of whiskey on Saturday night. In other words, the father and maybe the mother, or to-be, get drunk, and after a short time, the woman says, well, I think I'm pregnant. And then you go to the doctor and have some tests, and say, well, you are pregnant. And if they are kind enough not to have an abortion, then 9 months or so later, the population of the world increases by 1. So that's the way the world is. That's how most children are born in the modern world. It's just born out of not just like in India. You see, people they recite their family trees coming down from Brahma through some rishi, and my family tree is Scotch whiskey. Not sure exactly who my father was, but my mother said, the one who I think your father is was pretty drunk at the time, and I was too, so I can't remember his name or anything, but anyway, it was good whiskey. We enjoyed it. And by the way, you came too. Free gift with a bottle of whiskey. So they were very serious in Vedic culture about these important things. Having children is a very important thing. As I was saying, in the modern world, they think it's just for stupid. Only stupid women have children, but but then that means that if you're really intelligent, you work hard, you have a career, and all this kind of thing, but then there's no children, or there's no proper attention given to children. So the Prajetas, they were very serious about this. They're very serious about being fathers. They didn't just want to produce some Varna Sankara, as Arjuna mentions in Bhagavad-gita. they're very serious. If we're going to produce children, we'd better invite, through our activity of producing children, souls who are serious about God realization. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, having children like cats and dogs, as Srila Prabhupada used to say, there's no real benefit to the world. Children should be produced. Here we say children are produced. It's not exactly like a factory production, but it's children should be produced who are going to be of very high caliber, who by their behavior and their realization are a credit to the family and an asset to human society. So the Prajetas, they took up austerities. To prepare themselves for the grave responsibility of begetting children. So this is in Satya Yuga. People used to live for 100,000 years, and of that they spent 10,000 years, or one-tenth of their expected lifespan, performing austerities, so that they would be themselves of suitable consciousness, suitably purified, to beget worthy children. So by this austerity, they worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In these days, it's not possible to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead by exactly the same method as the Prajetas undertook, because we're not capable of entering the water and staying there very long, and we don't live very long, and we're not at all accustomed to performing any austerity, except maybe the most light austerity. So, in Kali Yuga, the great dispensation of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as Srila Prabhupada mentions here, and mentions again and again and again, is to chant the names of Krishna, especially the Maha Mantra, which Srila Prabhupada has mentioned here in the purport. Those who have read Srila Prabhupada's books up to the 4th canto, they must be well aware what the Maha Mantra is, because Srila Prabhupada often mentions it, but nevertheless he puts it here again. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we can attain the same perfection that persons in previous ages achieved by performing very difficult austerities. We can achieve the same perfection by chanting the holy names of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada finishes his purport to this verse by making the observation, or informing us, that in this age of Kali, if a person does not take advantage of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, which is offered as a great concession to the fallen human beings of this age, it is to be understood that he is very much bewildered by the illusory energy of the Lord. The chanting Hare Krishna is a concession. Actually, human life is meant for austerity, but we're not fit for that in this age. So, as a great concession, all right, we're not fit, so chant Hare Krishna. We're not fit for very severe austerity, so chant Hare Krishna. So if we don't do that, then we're really sa'atmaha. Puman bhavading nataret sa'atmaha. If we don't take advantage of all the facilities for becoming Krishna conscious, then we are committing suicide. Lord Krishna says it's killing our own spiritual prospects, working against our own real self-interest. So, Hare Krishna. Is there any question about this, please? Yeah, please ask.
One time I heard Prabhupada is saying that Mayapur should separate from India and make our own country.
You heard that. Well, I don't know what it's going to do with the verse. Under discussion. I never heard it. He may have said it, but at least I never heard it. If you want to check the veracity of this statement, please ask Jayapataka Maharaj or Bhavananda Prabhu, because between them, they know pretty much everything Prabhupada said about Mayapur. I mean, these two especially, they were the two. There were others, but they were the two who stayed and as leaders of the Mayapur project, and between them they pretty much know all of Prabhupada's instructions for Mayapur, which were given verbally and which we don't have in writing in the Veda base. I didn't hear that, but what I did hear, I actually heard this from Tapamoy, who's there close to you in Govardhan now, is that, this was years ago when he was Tapamoy Brahmachari. He was saying that we should have, not exactly our own, I never heard it, our own country, but it was our own monetary system. That we should have, we should be independent from the economic system, produce all our own food, our own cloth, and there wouldn't be much money used, but there would be, what was it? Tapamoy told me lira, just like in Prabhupada had mentioned, like the lira maybe just come from Italy. So he's saying there should be the gora or something. I can't remember exactly. Chaitanya says, yeah, you can ask Tapamoy about that. But better get it confirmed by Bhavananda and Jayapataka Maharaj, because he must have heard it from them. Because I don't think that Prabhupada spoke so much to Tapamoy directly.
It's
Maybe Bhagavat, he was one of those in the early days.
In the Mirrors of Prabhupada, he recounts that.
Yeah, but better to get it verified. And better not propagate it either, because, you could get our movement in a lot of trouble with the Indian government.
And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because then Prabhupada would say, according to that idea, that you separate Mayapur from India, make your own laws. In every temple throughout the world is an embassy of this country, and then you can make your own laws in the temple.
Yeah, exactly being another country, I don't know. I mean, it sounds very impractical to have a country which is, if this temple, it's like, less than an acre. It's smaller than the Vatican City, which is the smallest country in the world, as far as I know. But even the Vatican City, I mean, although it's theoretically an independent country, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, it has its own internal management, but for all intents and purposes, it works as part of Italy. And although the papal states used to have there used to be really a separate country. But nowadays, you see, if there's although they theoretically have their own guards in the Vatican, and practically the internal security, if there's any threat, it's the Italian government police who's going to do that. So I would think, in general, I would say it's more in line with Prabhupada's way of thinking to make the whole country Krishna conscious. Maybe starting with our own embassies, like that.
The idea of what I understood from that is that we can create our own law, because within embassies...
Yeah, we can create we should have our own laws, Well, it should be verified, because it is controversial and it's difficult to understand also, because for one thing, no government's going to allow you to do that, is one thing. Maybe to some extent they might allow it. I mean, there are, to some extent, just like, for instance, many organizations have their own security arrangements, and the security guards within the premises of that company, then they have powers to act practically as police. Although they can't try people in a civil court, but they can, through the company administration, say if a worker is nabbed stealing or something like that, they'll go through the administrative system of the company, and then they may be suspended, they may be fined, they may be thrown out from work, like this. So to some extent that goes on, in major companies throughout the world, that they do have their own administrative system. But you can't escape many of the laws you can't escape. Just like, for instance, in our movement, we might... Well, this is something facing our movement at the present time. In the Western world, they're insisting that all religions comply with their ideas of gender equality and homosexuality, and they're trying to enforce that. That in the Western world, there are. It looks like it's coming in many countries that if a religious institution which is authorized to perform marriages refuses to do so for homosexuals, then they'll get their license rescinded. So that's not happened yet, as far as I know, but it's, there are rumbles, the volcano's rumbling. So how to react to that? Well, that's one thing our leaders have discussed. You might say, well, come to India. Well, they may do the same thing in India also. Then what are you going to do? Go to a Muslim country, and then you have other problems. If I can be permitted to indulge, maybe I shouldn't. I was going to say a little bit of mental speculation here, but I have a feeling that Islam may become very prominent in the world in the future, not very distant future, because with the decadence of the Western world, people will want to look to something which has very clear moral standards. We're against homosexuality, and for all that divorce is allowed in Islam, basically it is a pro-family religion. Maybe not in Pakistan, where the allowance for divorce is misused, but in other actually, if they actually divorce according to the Sharia, then they have to say talaq once, wait 6 months, then say talaq again and wait 6 months, and then they can divorce. But in modern India and Pakistan, talaq, 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 they say it 3 times, and your wife is out the door. So it's a misuse of that. But basically, it's a very simple it's not very philosophical kind of. There has been philosophy in it, but modern Islam is not presented like that. It's, you could say, simplistic, and you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, you don't do this, you don't do this, and there's some moral standards. It's clear, and it's aggressively propagating. So I feel it may become prominent in the modern world or in the upcoming world, due to the, as I say, the decadence of modern society, in which everything goes, and even the Christian sects, they're mostly capitulating to this sinfulness, actually, in the form of, well, many of them already accept abortion and divorce, and now many of them are accepting homosexuality, and Western civilization is finished. It's a rotten hulk waiting to collapse. Because without moral strength, you can't go on. It's just like the Roman Empire went on for so many years on the strength of what they'd done before, but internally they were rotten, and eventually they were overrun by who? By the savages. Not the anyway, I can't remember exactly. Genghis Khan and all these people. So you get strength from following principles. And that's true in ISKCON also. If we stick to our principles, we'll have strength. If we water everything down, then there won't be any potency. If we stick strongly to our principles, even if it's unpopular in the modern world, then people who are seeking the truth will come. But if we try to make it available to everyone, then no one will come. Because why should they come to us? Because there's nothing special. We have nothing special to offer. If we allow, if we become synonymous with modern society, except that we're vegetarians, well, even many people in modern society are vegetarian, then what special thing do we have to offer? I mean, even kirtan now in the Western world, kirtan has become popular among people who are avowedly non-devotees. They just like it as a kind of relaxation technique, semi-spiritual relaxation technique, but there's no idea, or they don't want anything to do with bhakti, but it's just, they do kirtan and then you wind down and all the stress goes away and it's fun. So even kirtan you can get without joining ISKCON. So what is our specialty? The resolve to surrender to Krishna and to follow Guru, Sadhu and Shastra against the grain of modern society. Against what is presented by Srila Prabhupada, he's presented Shastra as it is, without any change. And many of the things he presents, they go against the principle, or the lack of principles, or the unprincipledness of modern society. Not only on the moral platform, but even on the platform of what's accepted as common knowledge. Prabhupada is strongly and vocally against that man has landed on the moon, and he says that they could not have done because the moon is further away than the sun. And it's controversial. Some of Prabhupada's followers, supposed to be followers, find it embarrassing. But Srila Prabhupada, he knew that it wasn't popularly accepted, and nevertheless he was very vocal about this point. So actually to really join the Hare Krishna movement means to become part of a socially unacceptable cult. We're trying to prove that in the Western world, we're trying to prove that we're not a cult, but according to their definitions, we are. Of course, we don't want to be lumped in with all these various foolish speculative movements. We want to show that it's not something new that someone has dreamed up, it's an ancient tradition. But in terms of believing in and following things which are considered foolish or socially reprehensible, I mean, our movement is that. And in modern India too, I mean, many of the things which Srila Prabhupada stood for and spoke against, most people in modern India think that it's wrong. And probably most of our devotees in India, from what I can observe, don't really believe that some of the things Prabhupada said are true, or that they should be followed, just like Prabhupada was for early marriage. And most educated people in India think that that's wrong, because they're educated like that, by the modern demoniac education system. And most people in modern India, including most of our devotees, or many of our devotees, think that women should go out and work, etc., etc., etc. So, to be a follower of Srila Prabhupada, it means actually to hold views. Well, hold views is a term coming from the relativistic society, but it means to be convinced of things which in modern society, like I say, they're either considered unimaginably foolish or totally reprehensible. So, if we actually want to join the Hare Krishna movement or follow Srila Prabhupada, then it means to be not in tune with modern society. But then the point is, getting back to what I was saying at the beginning of the class, that modern society itself is completely out of tune. It's cacophonic. And for real harmony, we have to get in tune with Krishna. That's the whole point. All right, Hare Krishna.